Good morning or afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Good
Yep.
morning if you're on the West Coast. Thank you for joining us today. Today we are blessed and honored to have Roy back with Acciva. Roy, thanks for making time. How are you doing today?
Doing well, John. Doing well. Thank you for having me, as always.
Oh, the pleasure is mine, truly. Hopefully you had a good weekend.
I did have a good weekend. It was a busy one. A lot of family stuff going on. But all that being said, no complaints.
Excellent, excellent. Always good to hear. Similar here. Got to attend a good networking event down here in Flower Mound, which is a city north of Dallas. Making some good connections, keeping the small business lifestyle going. Know what I mean?
Yep, I certainly do. I
So,
certainly do.
So please tell us, what insights have you in the world of financial management? I guess that's kind of the question I'd open off with more specifically. One of the interesting articles I read within the past couple of days was Target was basically rolling out a month-long Black Friday event.
Uh huh.
Obviously, that's substantially different than a one-time day or a two-day event. How does something like that impact cash flow? And in that line of reasoning, is that something due to COVID and everything around that? Is that something that you would anticipate a lot of other businesses to do as well?
I think that there's a couple of things at work there. One clearly is that the retail space across the board has taken a hit this year.
Big time.
Uh, Now, that being said, a lot of the larger retail entities have had decent years because in a lot of areas they've been the only option because of their online presence, because of their ability to take orders and ship. But I think what we're really seeing there is just regardless of what we had going on this year with COVID, Target is really taking the next step of what we've seen in the past. Because remember, it wasn't that long ago that after Black Friday, we would start talking about Cyber Monday. And then
Yep.
Cyber Monday became a whole week. And then it became, deals after deals to try to stimulate purchasing and all that. I really think we're just seeing the next evolution of that, which is them trying to pull forward the sales cycle, quite
Mhm.
honestly, and try to promote what they foresee as deals out to the consumer market. So I really just think it's a next step.
How far can that go? I mean, because that's one of those funny consumer things. You can only run a deal or a special for so long, or does it become a little bit more like the Joseph A. Banks model, where it's you kind of mark it up and then you always have a deal going. So it's the perceived deal. Where does that kind of go again in terms of applying it in the small business model? How does that look? Is that feasible?
Really in the small business model, those large companies like the Targets, the Amazons, the Walmarts, um, there are things that just based upon their size that they can get away with that the smaller business is going to struggle with competing in that same manner. Now, that being said, what the small business has that those larger businesses don't typically have is that direct relationship with a clientele,
Right.
that direct involvement in the community, all of those types of things. So the small business, some of the things that I've told people that have asked this year, what can I do to enhance my small business? One, enhance your online presence,
Big
create
time.
new sales channels there. If you can have an online marketplace, i.e., a store that people can buy from online, go ahead and set it up, get things out there. Now it takes some more work to manage it, obviously, and you've got to have a tighter eye on managing inventory. But those are some things that you can certainly do that you're not going to take these folks on head on necessarily,
Hmm.
but it certainly gives you an outlet that you wouldn't have otherwise. And even thinking about the circumstance that we're in, where in some states, in some municipalities and local areas where you struggle to have that face to face that you would before,
Exactly.
this can certainly augment that in this type of an environment and create the opportunity to make a sale that you wouldn't have otherwise because you're not looking at somebody face to face like you normally would.
100% agree. And I think you really touch on a fascinating point when you start getting into that whole online realm. Chad Tonko with Premier's
Yep.
market
Yep.
development. He'll hopefully be able to join us next week. We're confirming some schedule things. But the consumer behavior of online purchasing has dramatically shifted organically over the last couple of years. And then with the onset of COVID, I mean, the numbers are like freaky. I think the number was like 65% of consumer purchases are now done on a mobile device. So
Hmm.
now, not only does the website need to be mobile friendly, but you're almost getting to the point where it's like, okay, if you have regular interaction with your customers, you're really going to have to start looking at like a mobile app and that type of thing. And that's when you start talking about online stores and more integrated systems, tracking inventory. These are all
Yep.
things that, to your point, it's coming down the pipeline. Don't fight it, embrace it, get in front of it, and you'll be able to lead it off then.
That's absolutely right. And let's face it, there are some businesses that, by their nature, have to be in person.
For sure.
The ones that jump out at me, of course, are the repairmen and folks like that. I
Hmm.
can't fix your HVAC or your toilet or your plumbing or whatever from a distance. I
Correct.
have to be there to do it. But there are certainly other businesses that you know we can have the drop off, the pickup, and that type of stuff that
Hmm.
will occur. So those things happen.
For sure. And I think also when you're talking like customer journey stuff and general marketing practices, the way in which businesses meet consumers is obviously with COVID, especially has and will continue to evolve and change without a
Yep,
doubt.
undoubtedly,
So that,
undoubtedly. Hey,
oh, go ahead.
hey, John.
Yeah,
Live interaction here. I got to handle something real quick. Hold on.
sure thing. We'll give you a quick minute here. This is the beauty of Facebook
Hang on.
Live unscripted, y'all. This is exactly why you watch Facebook Live videos. You never know what's coming. This is totally unscripted. And now I'm going to have to ask, hopefully, all good.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Oh yeah.
perfect.
Most definitely.
Good stuff.
Most definitely.
Well, we'll
So
continue.
it's done. I'm covered. I got my package that I was waiting for. That I had the 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. window of when it was
Yep.
going to show up, and of course, it showed up right now. So
Oh, I love it. That's the small, see, that's the small business lesson of the day, though. Life is going to happen. You're going to get a few curveballs thrown at you. You got to take it in stride and run with it.
oh my goodness, there has never ever been a time where we've all been forced to get out of comfort zones and deal with temporary disruption of some way, shape, or form. It's just the reality of where we're at right now. And, you know, we'll all pick up and move forward, regardless of what happens over the next few days. The sun's still coming up.
Mhm.
The tides are still coming in and out. The rivers are still flowing. All of that stuff's still going to happen.
For
So,
sure.
take it and keep moving forward. And it's interesting because when you get to this time of year, in the retail space, people are thinking about the holidays and Christmas and all that. And if you weren't, you just have to step into any retail store and see the Christmas stuff up
Oh, it's all
already,
over.
you know. But you start to think, okay, uh, after Christmas gets done and then we get into January, we got to close out the financial books for the year. We've, got to prepare for our tax filings and all those types of
Hmm.
things. So you get to this time of year and you start to think there are a handful of business decisions that I may or may not need to make. And
Precisely.
this has certainly been a unique year for that. And between the beginning of the year and now, we've had two CARES Acts passed that have affected the tax code, that have affected business decisions that we all, or the fundamentals of business decisions that we all have to keep into consideration as we move into these last couple of months of the year.
And I think that brings up a good question. I know there is a lot of variability and a lot of moving parts, but from what you've seen and the people that you've had an opportunity to work with, is it a good or bad idea to try to get ahead and buy up some extra supplies, buy up some extra inventory, see if you can get some of the group discounting, or with current tax code, tax law, not a good idea? Is it, what does it kind of depend on? Because I know you have some theories where it's like load up, just get it
Yeah.
while it's cheap because you're going to use it anyway within 6 months. And then there's that other theory, it's like put it off for 3 months because you don't need it for six, and then buy it then.
Yeah. y- It really does depend. And it depends upon your throughput and it depends on the type of product. So, literally, if it's the type of product that regardless of what the economic cycle is going to be, regardless of what happens with business or the election or anything else, I am going to use this or I am going to sell this and I can predict it. It's going to happen. All of those are the types of things that it's good to load up on when you really know it's a good price. And if you really know your business well, you know when it's a good price.
Mhm.
So for things that are maybe The turnover is less predictable, and you're looking at it saying, well, I move 3 of these a year. I can get it now for a better price, but I may only move 2, or whether that number's 30 or 300 or whatever it is.
Plug in your variable.
Yeah. Then that's the situation where you just sit there and say, maybe getting the bulk discount right now is not the best idea because I don't have that type of predictability. Um,
Okay.
and and that's really what it amounts to, is that what kind of predictability do you have in that product? I, as an example, in working with folks that are in the heavy equipment, heavy machinery business, I know guys that would buy a piece of replacement part, a replacement part of some sort, and
Hmm.
pick your piece of heavy equipment here, right? For a vehicle, could have been a transmission or something like that. For HVAC equipment, it could be a compressor or something along those lines, or evaporator coils or whatever.
Right.
Regardless, okay, I'll never get that cheap. I need to get one now. Well, yeah, that on the surface sounds like a great idea, but do you know that you're going to be able to replace it? When's the last time you replaced something like that?
Right. Exactly.
And was it on your equipment? Was it on somebody else's? So those are the types of things that you think about when you start looking at, okay, I'm getting into the end of the year. Are my suppliers starting to have some of these deals? You need to start to evaluate, okay, am I really going to use that? And that starts to get to, how do you manage your business? Do you have a
Yep.
good inventory management system? Are you able to track those types of things? Do you have that type of insight on your business? And if you do, then hey, great, go ahead. If you don't, all right, let's kick this around a little bit more and let's make a decision. Now, the whole caveat on some of that is, if this is something that you got sold already,
Right. Different ball
you
game
know,
entirely.
yeah, exactly. You're a few months down the road that that you don't have to deliver it yet, but yeah, that sale's pretty much in the box, particularly on those bigger types of items, as I was describing a minute ago.
Hmm.
Obviously, yeah, go ahead and take care and knock some margin off.
Different ballgame entirely. So
Yep,
then another small business application question. We're
yep.
talking again, sub 20 million in revenue, sub 50 employees. Are there major tax implications if I buy those supplies before January 1st, 2021, or not really? Or does it depend on it, or does it depend? And if so, what would it depend on?
There are dependencies in there. The thing that I always talk to people about is, when it comes to tax law, make good business decisions. Don't focus solely on the tax decision. It, Make sure that what you're doing is going to be a positive impact for the business as a whole. Don't narrow your focus down to just what the good decision is going to be for your
Hmm.
tax status this year. Now, anybody would tell you anything that you can do to accelerate expenses and defer revenues is, because most of us and most small businesses are tax based or cash basis taxpayers.
Right.
That's always a good move as a tax planning strategy in that regard. Now, that being said, those expenses have to be true expenses to the business, not just cash outflows, but something that's going to hit your P&L as an expense. So when you start to talking about, do I invest in, well, the question is, are you investing in something that's going on your balance sheet that now you are keeping long term and becomes inventory? Because that is a different it has different tax implications
'Cause I was going to ask, are
than,
you
yeah,
talking strictly expenses or cost of goods?
exactly.
Okay.
So expenses are what you want to try to accelerate if you're going to try to do that. um, one company that I talked to about a year ago, we had a conversation about this, and their reaction was, oh, well, then I can go out and buy a bunch of equipment. And the answer was, well, no, you can't. You can buy the equipment, and everybody, I always caveat with, talk to your tax advisor, talk to your CPA about these
Hmm.
types of things, because depending on the type of equipment and what you're doing and all that, there may be tax advantages to doing that, and parts of the tax code that you can take advantage of and expense those things like 179, Section 179 write-offs and the like. But you've got to know whether it really does impact your business and whether it's smart to do that this year versus putting it off and depreciating those types of things long term. So there
Amen.
are a lot of things that go into it. Now, for your regular expenses, yeah, sure. If you can accelerate those types of things, go
If you're going to
ahead.
be using it anyway, if it's not going to be throwing your cash flow way out of whack, absolutely go ahead and get the write off on it.
That's absolutely right. And right now, and I always say this regardless of the time of year, but especially as you're getting down to these last couple of months, I'd advise any small business owner, keep your eye on your cash. More so now than ever. These last couple of months of the year are going to be interesting. We're going to have a lot of things going on in the global economy, in the national economies, in our local economies. We've got plenty of uncertainty and things like that out there. So what do we want to do? We want to keep our eye on our cash. That's fundamentally what we want to do.
So when you're talking, keep your eye on the cash, so to speak. What would you say to a small business? Are there any ratios that they really need to be keeping an eye on? I mean, when you're saying obviously you always want to keep an eye on cash, but what's kind of like the driving force? Is it make sure you have enough stockpile for 3 months? Is it what's kind of what are we shooting for? What's the goal?
Yeah, I definitely like to tell people to try to have 3 to 6 months of cash on hand. In a lot of businesses, the owners would tell you that's unrealistic. I can't possibly do that. There's no way I could run my business that way. Uh, You know your business better than uh, those of us that advise you a lot of times in terms of what's practical. But the flip side of that is that don't completely push that aside and say, well, that's not how we've done it in the past, or we couldn't possibly do that. The reality is it not possible because you haven't tried it? So I
Mhm.
certainly do try to sit there and advise people to stockpile as much as they can, um, just in case. Now, there is a school of thought that you always try to work your cash down towards the end of the year, that you push off cash receipts, you do those types of things. And I'm not going to argue with anybody that wants to push that type of a strategy. I will tell you that it all depends on your specific circumstances on whether you do that. But when I say keep a close eye on your cash, what I really mean is start to look at your expenditures, start to look at your inflows, and really monitor that cash flow. And are you starting yourselves off in the best possible way that you can for 2021 in your cash position and cash situation?
So typically, then I know we only have about 5 to 10 minutes here. So kind of forgive me for a really high level question here.
Sure.
When a small business is looking to jumpstart the next year, I know we're already in November now, so we've got less than 2 full months. How far out do you really want to be planning that next year launch, so to speak? And what are those kind of key things you want to watch for as you hit January 1 of the following year? What are those catapult or trigger moments that you really try to capture?
If you've got any kind of a history at all, one of the things you want to look at is your past couple of years. What did January, February, and March look like? And plan for that. The other thing that you'll want to do is based upon the experience that you've had this past year, what are the conditions that you anticipate continuing into January, February, and March? And plan based off of that. So a lot of it is looking at history. A lot of it is looking at what your own personal view is in anticipation of what might happen next.
And
Um, and base off of that. And it'll be different for every business. That's the challenge.
I was gonna say because I mean you know statistics and such. You're always looking at the past to predict the future, but when you're
Mhm.
dealing with a very unusual year like 2020, there is certainly a gut instinct element where you're just kind of following the gut feel a little bit. Yes, you look at the past, you try to build that projection into the future, but there are going to be variables that you have to take a guess on, for lack of a better term, and hopefully it's a well educated guess. But there are still variables that you're going to have to plug in as a business.
Right. I mean, The business that jumps out at me as being one that always has a big kick in January is the health and wellness business, right?
Yep, exactly. And all the New Year's resolutions, we're going to get healthy this
Exactly.
year. Yep.
Is this January going to look that way? You would
$1 million question if you own a gym.
exactly, exactly. So, how do you plan for what this January is going to look like? Is it going to get a kick? Probably. How has your health and wellness business changed over the past year? And do you have a model that you can deliver regardless of whether your facility is open or not?
Hmm.
And I've talked to some folks over the past couple of weeks that are in that business that adjusted very quickly from a physical location to more of a coaching model
Yep.
and to pushing people towards what can you do with body weight, with stuff you have around the house, with all of those types of things, as opposed to investing a lot in their own personal
For
home
sure.
equipment and working down that path.
Well,
So it's a specific example, but it's a business that very clearly this January is going to look a lot different than any January
for
we've seen in the past.
For sure, and it touches on those two of the points you brought up earlier, one of which is know your local economy, because, yes, you have the
Hmm.
national economy you always need to keep an eye on. You have your kind of regional economy, but then, yes, you do have that local economy. For example, you're in St. Louis, you have different restrictions than we have here in the suburbs of Dallas, which is very different than LA, Chicago, and New
Yep.
York. So know your local economy. Then the other thing you just brought up there, developing that online reputation, that online interaction. I mean, so in that
Yep.
gym model, yeah, there are some places in the US where you can't go to the physical gym. If you own that gym, you can't just shut down revenue and say, oh, well, I'll wait for it to back up. No one
Right.
has the cash to just last on that forever. So adapting that model to thrive in that virtual slash digital economy and adapting the business's model is essential.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I'll bring it to the fractional CFO slash accounting slash consultant world that I work in. I'd worked a lot with technology before, have dealt with people all over the country for years in
Mhm.
different things that I've done through phone calls, through Zoom, through all of those types of technologies. The way it's changed now is that people that may be right down the street are more comfortable having a Zoom or a phone call, whereas they wanted to be in person before. And that's okay. It's just a matter of saying, listen, there's a lot that we can still do and interact like this, being remote from each other than we could before. So let's take advantage of it and let's do it that way.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great way to kind of like summarize everything, where it's a very uncomfortable economy for a lot of industries. You're going to have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You're going to have
Yep.
to adapt. You cannot just stand idle and say, I'm going to go back to, we're going to wait for things to go back to the way they were. I don't like saying it, but there is a little bit of the new normal thing.
Yeah.
There are some definite advantages. And yeah, I miss a lot of the good old handshake, going to all those networking events. You get to look people in the eye. I miss that stuff too. And
Sure.
here in Texas, it's better than most places. We're able to kind of start doing that again. But no, to your point, I'm doing way more Zoom meetings. And yeah, small businesses have to get comfortable with that. It's where it is now, and there's going to be a healthy portion of it going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And people are just starting to get, in some cases, a lot more comfortable with where we're at and with the accommodations that are in place and the restrictions that are in place, at least around me and around a lot of the folks that I'm physically around. But I know, as you mentioned, there are a lot of areas that it's not that way. And it's either we've still got restrictions in place in that locality, and
Hmm.
they can't have those types of interactions. So you've got to adjust and move forward and make the best that you can out of it.
Amen. Amen. So today's lesson, y'all, make sure you build your online sales channel. Roy,
Yep.
thank you so much. Roy Hinkamper with Acciva. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us today. Truly, truly appreciate it. Y'all, please make sure to give our Facebook page a like the post, and drop a comment in the comment section. What are you doing as a small business to positively and effectively manage your cash flows for the last 2 months of 2020? We're almost done with the year. Hang in there. We're going to turn the corner and we'll get back going strong. Y'all stay safe and stay blessed.